There's also another concept in Unity called a prefab. A prefab is a collection of game objects and components that you can easily duplicate, and if you change the prefab, all the copies of the prefab will update to reflect the change. So if you have a bunch of objects that are identical in your scene, it's a way of leveraging your work and letting you only change one object instead of all of them. Okay, so the way that prefabs work is you have an asset in the project window. That's the prefab. Now when you drag it onto the hierarchy window, it becomes an instance of that prefab. If you change the prefab in the project window, all the instances in the hierarchy window will also be changed to reflect what you did in the project window. Now, if you change something in the hierarchy, then the text will go from blue to black, and that game object will no longer be linked to the prefab. So if you change an instance in the hierarchy, the other prefabs aren't going to be affected, but that game object will stop being an instance of a prefab. So to make a change that's going to be reflected among all the instances, you need to make it to the prefab in the project window. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. If you right-click on the cube and hit duplicate, or go to edit duplicate, or press Control or Command D, you'll get these copies. And I'm going to move them around so they're not on top of each other. Okay, so now I have 4 copies of this sphere cube combination. And if I change one by, say, disabling the mesh renderer component, I'm going to click on this, and you'll see that the sphere is no longer rendered. The other one's the same. So if I wanted that to be what this object really looks like, I'd have to click on each sphere, uncheck the mesh renderer, and I'm done. But I had to do it 4 different times. So I'm going to go ahead and click Control Z or Edit Undo and go back to where I only had 1 copy. Okay, then I'm going to click on the sphere, add the renderer back in, and now I'm going to go to my project window, go to Create Prefab, click on it, type in sphere cube, and hit enter. Then I'm going to drag this cube with the child sphere onto that prefab in the project window. So now this object has been linked to this prefab. When I change the prefab in the project window by, say, unchecking the mesh renderer of just the sphere here, then it's reflected in this object in the hierarchy. Now this prefab right here isn't in the game. Only objects that are in the hierarchy are in the game. But because this game object is linked to this prefab, it reflects whatever changes you make to this prefab. So I'm going to add that mesh renderer back in on the sphere. If you want to make copies of this, you just drag the prefab from the project window into the hierarchy, and it appears in the scene view. Or you can drag it just straight into the scene view, and it will also appear. And then it'll automatically populate in your hierarchy. You can tell these copies are called instances of this prefab. You can tell that they are instances of a prefab because they're colored in blue text instead of black. If you make a change to an instance, like uncheck the mesh renderer, well, that didn't do it. If you make some changes, like say delete the mesh renderer, you'll get this dialog that says you're going to lose the prefab connection. And if you hit continue, it just means that while these two are still instances of the prefab, this one is not. So if you make a change to the prefab, like delete the cubes collider, delete that, remove component, that these two instances reflected that change, but the one that had the prefab connection broken did not reflect that change. To make one of your game objects the default for this prefab, say these two are instances right now of this prefab. And say I wanted this one to be the real instance. This is the one I want to be copied over and over again. You just have to drag that back onto the prefab, and it'll replace it. And now you'll see that all of the instances of the prefab are copies of the one that I just dragged on.